Two guys. One burns 90 grand a year. The other burns 40. Who's winning? Say it out loud in your head right now. You already picked one. Almost everybody picks the same one. Spend less, come out ahead. Simple math. Except it's backwards. And by the end of this, you're going to watch me prove it with real numbers. And then I'm going to hand you the one calculation that tells you, not guesses, tells you whether you're one of the people quietly pulling ahead or one of the people quietly going under. Stick around for that, because it changes how you'll read every neighbor's driveway for the rest of your life. Here's the number that should not be possible. 3 out of every 5 households in this country spend more than they take home. Not in a rough month. Every year on average, forever. Sit with that for 1 second, because it wrecks a word you use all the time, average. You picture average as the safe, sensible middle. It isn't. It's the middle of a slow sink. So if someone tells you your spending looks about average, that was never the good news. That might be the warning label. Now here's the part one actually want you locked in for. There's a single number, one calculation, that separates the households climbing from the households drowning. And once you know how to run it on yourself, you will never trust average again. We're getting there. But first you need to see it happen to 2 real people, because the gap between what you'd assume and what's actually true is the whole lesson. Call the first guy Marcus. 90 grand a year, walks out his door. Newer car in the driveway. Good health insurance. A mortgage on a house with a spare room nobody's used since 2019. Every visible signal says Marcus is living large, maybe even a little too large. Call the second guy Derek. 40 grand a year total. Old car paid off. Smaller place. Derek clips coupons. Derek can tell you the price of eggs down to the cent. Put these 2 in a lineup and ask a room full of strangers who's the responsible one. Every hand points at Derek without a second of hesitation. Now let me show the room the number it never had. Marcus earns $155,000. After taxes, about $117,000 actually lands in his account. He spends 90 of it, quietly, every year, with nobody clapping. Marcus banks $27,000. Derek earns $42,000. After taxes, roughly 37 lands. He spends 40. Derek doesn't save anything. He goes about $3,000 short every single year. And 3 grand doesn't just vanish. It shows up on a card, or it eats whatever cushion he started with. Read that again slowly. The guy spending $90,000 a year is getting richer by $27,000. The guy spending 40 is getting poorer by 3. The big spender is winning. The responsible one is losing. The number the whole room stared at, how much each man spends, pointed at exactly the wrong man. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because it doesn't stay contained to Marcus and Derek. This exact blind spot is why people who are genuinely winning financially still feel like they're falling behind. And I'm about to show you why your own eyes are lying to you about every single person you know. Give me 1 more minute on this trap before we go there. You can see Marcus's car. You cannot see the 27 grand he never spent. You can see Derek's coupons. You cannot see the 3 grand of debt he's quietly stacking every December. We rank people by what leaves their wallet, because that's the only part of the transaction we're ever allowed to witness. And it cuts the other direction too. You watch a neighbor's kitchen renovation, their 3rd vacation this year, and your brain files it as proof they're winning, when it might be the exact opposite. You've never once seen anyone's gap. Not one person's. You've only ever seen the spending, and you've spent years quietly ranking your life against a number that has already been shown to lie to your face. So if spending can't answer, am I winning? You reach for the next obvious move. Hold your own number up against the average. Feels grounded. Feels responsible. It's the single most expensive habit in personal finance, and here's why. The average U.S. household spends $78,535 a year. Call it $6,500 a month. Housing alone eats $26,000 of that, a full third, gone before you've made a single decision. Transportation takes another 13. Add those 2 up, and you've burned through more than half your money on just getting to work and having somewhere to sleep. Food's another 13%. Healthcare, 8. Entertainment doesn't even crack 5. Sounds like a real household, right? A sensible middle you could measure yourself against. It's a mirage. Watch what happens when you stop blending it. Split every household into 5 income brackets, lowest to highest. Bottom group spends about $35,000 a year. Next, $50,000. Middle, $67,000. Fourth, $90,000. Top group, $150,000. The top bracket spends over 4 times what the bottom bracket spends, and somewhere in that spread sits a fake number, $78,000, that describes nobody. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. I'm going to show you 2 households that spend the exact same amount of money, down to the dollar, and one of them is building real wealth while the other is sliding into a hole. Same spending. Opposite fates. 30 seconds, and you'll never trust that average number again. Household 1 earns $180,000, spends $78,000, banks the rest. Household 2 earns $70,000, spends the same $78,000, and covers the gap with debt. On paper, identical. In reality, one gets richer every month and one gets poorer every month, and the average they both supposedly match tells you nothing about which is which. And here's the number that should stop you cold. In the most recent year, we have full tax data for 3 of those 5 income brackets. 3 in 5 households spent more than they brought home after taxes. Not recklessness. At those income levels, rent, a car to get to work, food, insurance, those alone outrun the paycheck before anyone's made a single bad decision. So when you feel relieved that your spending is about average, understand what you actually just did. You compared yourself to a crowd where most people are sinking, and you took comfort in matching the crowd. So if spending's broken and average is broken, what do you actually measure? This is the part that matters. The number that tells you whether you're winning isn't what you spend, and it isn't what you earn. It's the distance between them. Take your real take-home pay, what actually lands in your account, subtract what you spent. What's left is your gap. Turn that gap into a percentage of your take-home, and you've got your savings rate. That's the whole game in one number. Marcus spends 90 out of 117. Savings rate, about 23%. Derek spends 40 out of 37. Savings rate, below 0. It does not matter that Derek spends less than half of what Marcus spends. The gap is what compounds. The gap is what eventually becomes a paid-off house, an investment account, an actual retirement. Spending is just the part of your money that leaves and never comes home. One honest catch before we go further, because I'm not going to hand you a formula that quietly breaks the second you use it wrong. There's a version of this mistake sitting at every single income level, and in about 90 seconds I'm going to show you 2 men who both think they're winning and are both dead wrong in opposite directions. But first, the one correction that makes this math actually work. You cannot run this on your salary, only on take-home. If you measure your gap against gross pay, you're flattering yourself with money that was never yours. It went to taxes before you ever touched it. And you cannot judge your savings rate against the national average either. Here's why. Straight from the spending data, the lowest earning households spend 42% of everything on housing alone. The highest earners spend 29%. Same category, wildly different bite, because rent doesn't shrink to fit a smaller paycheck. Put that in dollars. Out of a $40,000 budget, over $16,000 is gone to housing before anyone decides anything. No willpower involved. The math is rigged before the person wakes up. Out of a much bigger budget at the top, housing takes a smaller share, and tens of thousands of dollars sit there as genuinely free choices, savings or a nicer car, either way. A 20% savings rate on $150,000 and a 20% savings rate on $40,000 are not the same achievement. The second one is brutally harder because a much bigger slice of that income was already spoken for before its owner made a single choice. Let's put faces on the 2 ways to get this wrong, because one of them is probably yours. Derek's identity is built on not spending. He says no to dinners out. He drives the old car. He knows the price of everything and feels certain that means he's doing fine. That's Derek's mistake. He's confused a low number for a winning number. His gap sits at 0, sometimes below it, and no amount of coupon clipping fixes that, because his problem was never spending too much. It's that after necessities take their cut of a small income, there's almost nothing left to become a gap. Derek doesn't need to spend less. He needs to earn more, or he runs in place forever. Now the opposite man. Call him Eric. Eric earns $200,000, spends $150,000. Nicer neighborhood, nicer car, vacations he feels he's earned. I make great money, he'll tell you, and he's not wrong about the money. He's wrong about everything else. After taxes, Eric keeps about $148,000 and spends $150,000. His gap is also roughly 0, same finish line as Derek, arrived at from the opposite direction. Eric feels like the richest man in every room he walks into, and he's building almost nothing, because his spending grew to swallow every raise he's ever gotten. Derek judges himself by how little leaves his account. Eric judges himself by how much enters it. Both are staring at the wrong side of the ledger. Both end the year with nothing. So who actually wins out of the 3 of them? Not the biggest earner, not the smallest spender. In about a minute, I'll show you exactly what that $27,000 a year gap turns into over 10 years, and it's a bigger number than either of these men will ever believe is possible for themselves. The winner is Marcus, sitting in the middle on both scores. Spends more than Derek, earns less than Eric, and outbuilds them both by $27,000 a year, not because he found a secret, but because he's the only one of the 3 actually watching the gap. He lets his spending rise, just never as fast as his income does. The distance between the 2 keeps widening, and that widening is the entire story. Now, I want to be careful with this next part because nobody can promise you a market return, and anyone who does is selling you something. So let's use a conservative, historical long-run average, the kind of number you'd find in any standard retirement projection, nothing exotic. Invested at that kind of ordinary long-run rate, Marcus's $27,000 a year turns into somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 over a decade and comfortably past $1 million over 2. Those are estimates built on historical averages, not guarantees. Markets move, and yours might move better or worse. But the direction is the point. Money that's never spent is money that gets to grow. Derek's zero doesn't stay zero. His $3,000 shortfall runs the other way, onto a card, at the kind of interest rate that turns a little borrowed into a lot owed. The frugality he's proud of is quietly losing a race he doesn't know he's running. Eric's zero just stays zero. No matter how good the car looked getting there. Same 3 men. 3 completely different futures. And the thing that decided it wasn't visible to any of them, not even to themselves, for years. Derek's answer to "Am I doing better or worse?" was "I spend less than most people." Eric's answer was "I earn more than most people." Both felt like proof. Both were noise. The only answer that holds up is the gap, measured against what you keep, judged against what's realistically achievable at your income. So let's make this yours. 2 minutes, right now out loud, so there's no mystery left in it. Say you take home $60,000 this year, after tax, the money that actually hit your account. Over the same year, rent, car, food, insurance, everything, you spent $54,000. Your gap, $6,000. Divide that by $60,000, 10%. That's your savings rate. Now you're not guessing whether you spend more or less than the average person. You know the exact distance between what you kept and what you burned, and you can watch that one number move, year over year, for the rest of your life. And here's why this single number outranks every budgeting hack you've ever heard. Take that same person, same $60,000 take home, and move their savings rate from 10% to 20%. That's not just an extra $6,000 in 1 year. Over 30 years, at an ordinary historical market average, again an estimate, not a promise, that 10-point shift is the difference between retiring with a few $100,000 and retiring with well over $1 million. Same salary, same job, same paycheck. The only thing that changed was the gap. So here's the actual move. Pull your real take-home pay for the year, what hit your account, not your salary. Subtract everything that went back out. Divide what's left by that take-home number. Positive and growing? You're pulling ahead, whatever your car looks like. 0 or under. You're going backwards, no matter how little you spend, no matter how much you earn. And then, don't measure that number against the national average. You now know exactly how broken that comparison is. Measure it against what's actually achievable in your income band, against people carrying the same fixed costs you carry. Stop measuring yourself against the crowd. The crowd is mostly underwater, and standing level with people who are sinking has never once made anyone rich. The man spending $90,000 a year might be the one quietly winning. The man spending 40 might be the one quietly losing. The only way to know which one you are is to stop staring at what leaves your account and start watching the gap. Better or worse was never a question about the money going out. It was always a question about the money you managed to keep.